Our company now teaches many courses in mastering the mind, personal reinvention. It's becoming fun for people to take some of the courses from a lifelong winner like Dennis and hear the perspective of a loser like myself. Many people who might have been skeptical about our principles really working would hear my life stories and think, well, if he can do it, I can. I was never that bad. You cannot tell me anything about yourself that would surprise me. You can't offend me. You can't shock me. You couldn't be focusing on this program if you were as low as I once was. Listening to this, you're already ahead of where I was. In fact, the lower you are now, the more fun you're going to have if you take reinvention on as a personal project. Every word in this program is part of my overall goal to get you to understand that you can make yourself up as you go along. You can redesign yourself completely, and not because there's necessarily anything wrong with you, but just for the sheer joy of reinvention. There's no joy like it. The way I got started back to the spirit was this. I began to allow myself to think. It sounds almost too simple, but I found that true victims don't do it. They don't think. They brood and ruminate and worry. And then they feel depressed. And then they feel angry. And the deadly beat goes on. It circles back on itself. As a woman in a workshop once told me, self-pity is like a snake that gets in your brain and lays its eggs there. Here's what I finally allowed myself to think. What if it were true that I become what I think about all day long? What would I want to think about? If I knew I would become what that was, what would I want that to be? That was the first step on my way out. It can be your first step too, no matter where you are. Plato kept saying it, but we would not listen. Thinking is the soul talking to itself. For me to save my own soul, I had to let it begin talking to itself. I had to let it split in two. Watch what happens to your own life the minute you become practiced at this dual thinking process. The higher self inside us can get us to do just about anything. During times of crisis, it shouts, and we respond with superhuman strength. It is the voice of the human spirit, and in normal times, it remains quiet, while old voices from the past take its place in our brains. The old voices belong to our teachers, peers, siblings, parents, their shaming and condemnation echoing throughout our skulls, telling us they are the voice of our own conscience. Without thinking, we take those critical voices to be our own. You should do it, one voice says. You're obligated to do it. Stop being so selfish. Any kind of organized person would have done it by now. And then we end up not doing it, because a voice of shame and judgment is not a very inspiring voice. It's an annoying voice. And inside all of us, there's a deeper, stronger voice that eventually starts to talk back. It says, "Don't tell me what to do." We somehow love that voice. It's the voice of the rebel in us, the part that can't stand everyday obligations. It's the greatest part of who we are, and we want to learn to increase the volume on that voice, because the louder it gets, the freer we become. The volume of the negative voices from the past can be turned down a little more each day until the voice of the real you, the voice of the spirit, emerges to rule your life and lead you in the pursuit of happiness. Those who follow the part of themselves that is great will become great, said Mencius. Those who follow the part that is small will become small. The voice of strength in a crisis is also the voice that can lead you in your journey to happiness, once you see the value of that journey. A lot of us have been confused about the pursuit of happiness. It seems we've been yelled at so many times about being selfish that we've equated our own happiness with absolute evil. But cultivating and strengthening our own happiness is not evil. It actually benefits others. For example, one of the best gifts a parent can give a child is to be a happy parent. One of the best gifts a wife can give her husband is her own personal happiness. Her joy in living is one of the most gratifying things he experiences. If she relates to him in a depressed, testy, needy, emotional way, it becomes a dependency, not a loving relationship. Happy people have more to give others. They have more energy and they have more life. A happy person owns a spirit that adds power to any act of giving. A person who's angry and depressed and serving someone out of a sense of obligation is poisoning the gift with resentment. That kind of giving is not really giving. It's a form of acting out a feeling of obligation. It's trying to live up to someone else's expectation. It is the daily life of a victim. These kinds of people are passive observers of their own mental fatigue and sadness. They think there's nothing they can do about it. They don't understand that there's another part of the brain just waiting to be activated, another voice just waiting to have the volume pumped up. It's the voice of the human spirit. Victims become passive when they can't find faith or confidence or courage to do something. Then they tell themselves they don't have the power to do it. Owners know that faith and courage only come later, and that they're rewards, not requirements for action. The power to do something often shows up halfway into the doing of the thing, not up front. Do the thing, said Ralph Waldo Emerson, and you shall have the power. The action itself is the source of courage. Doing it is what erases the fear of doing it. I once told my consultant, Steve Hardison, in an admiring voice, "You can do things other people are afraid to do." He acknowledged that that was true, but then he said, "And the only reason I can do these things is because I've done them. Doing them is how I learned to do them." Fear is overcome by doing what we fear to do. Action defeats fear, but you've got to start it yourself. It won't happen on its own. The action you take doesn't even have to be perfect. It will